Welcome to Extra Time Tasmania, a dedicated independent Tasmanian football podcast. On this, our first episode, we begin by sitting down with arguably one of Tasmania's best ever players, Kurt Reynolds. His first taste of football came at Trevallyn Primary School in Launceston. Then, at the age of 16, he was invited into the Australian Institute of Sport. What followed was an incredible journey, which took him to the World Youth Championships, where he captained the young Socceroos in 1987, followed by playing at the highest level in Australia, the National Soccer League. Now living back in Tasmania, not far from where he grew up, Kurt sits down with us to tell his remarkable story. This is Extra Time Tasmania, and this is Kurt Reynolds' story. Well, I've known you for many years, Kurt. Your football journey has been a quite extraordinary one. When you look back and reflect, do you ask yourself, how did a kid from Trevallyn end up captaining his country?
Yes, Rick, I certainly do look back and reflect in that regard, and it's been quite a journey. It's certainly taken a lot of hard work and a little bit of luck along the way as well, because when you think about it, it's a long way from Trevallyn here in Launceston to playing at a World Youth Cup in Santiago in South America.
You've almost done full circle, haven't you? You've come back and you're not living too far away from where you actually grew up in the next suburb in Riverside. But let's start from Trevallyn, from the beginning. How and when did football begin for Kurt Reynolds?
Early days, I loved sport. I was involved in every sport that I could access, and my parents would take me to and let me participate. So I started playing at approximately the age of 6 years of age when the Trevallyn Junior Soccer Club was formed, which my parents were part of, the initial committee there. And that would have been around the early 70s, 73, 74. So I started playing at around 6 years of age and absolutely fell in love with the game from that very point.
Who were some of your major influences in those early days playing the sport at Trevallyn?
First and foremost, my parents have been my best supporters throughout my whole life, and luckily I have a great relationship with my parents to this day. And I've also been very lucky to have grown up my whole, most of my adult life with my grandparents in my life as well. So I had a very strong parental and grandparental support network around me. In addition to that, there were some really interesting and proactive local characters in and around the Trevallyn area who were involved in football, the likes of Enrico Vizentine, the likes of Ross Smith, the likes of John Bigger, who came from ethnic backgrounds and brought a taste for the game to the small suburb of Trevallyn and really enhanced the level of interest in the game within that suburb.
Some great names there. And look, I know some people don't like to talk themselves up, but you were a talented all-round sportsman as a junior. Talk us through that and how you decided that it was football that would become your chosen sport.
As I said, I indulged in as much sport as I possibly could and really enjoyed a whole variety of sports in my younger years. However, my passion for football came from watching Match of the Day on ABC every Monday night, staying up until 10, 11 o'clock at night when that was telecast back in the days of ABC football coverage. I would buy the Shoot magazine whenever Mum and Dad could afford it because it wasn't cheap, and came about a month late into the Birchall's store in town. Be lining up to buy that Shoot magazine, which I read from front to back, month in, month out, week in, week out, whenever it was available. Watching the World Cups, of course, the 74 World Cup I remember little bits of, but I was young, and certainly the 78 World Cup, which Argentina beat Holland in the final. Sorry,
we won't talk too much about that one, Kurt. But no, that's fair enough. This is about you, not me.
Yeah. Sorry, Rick. But, that was a key point of interest for me. Not long after that, I really started to commit to the game of football. One particular sport that I'd love to mention, though, and it's something for the young ones coming through, is little athletics in Launceston was very strong at the time, and looking back, I feel really, I know that it helped me to learn how to run, because obviously in football you might run between 8 to 11 kilometres per match, depending on what position you're playing. But just the opportunity to learn how to run and breathe and use your body effectively through little athletics was a fantastic opportunity also.
Um, it's an interesting one because you talk about those wonderful people who had a big influence on your career in addition to your parents and grandparents. I know, being from a Dutch family myself, football was always our sport. But it was a tough time, wasn't it, that era, because football wasn't looked upon favourably at all by many people in the community. It really was the European and the South American, in general, the overseas influences that really made football possible and gave the opportunity for young people to take up the sport. It was a pretty tough time to be accepted to some degree in the sport.
Yeah, I agree. It was a difficult time, and I think looking back, and to some degree it still exists, the challenge of facilities for the game is still significant. And I recall situations, certainly in Trevelyan, where there was negotiations over getting access to the round oval, traditionally other codes, AFL and/or more so cricket in that case, but even just getting access to that ground in front of the primary school was a challenge. And yes, the game was seen as maybe the wog ball or the round ball game that wasn't so familiar to the AFL-orientated state of Tasmania, with respect, of course. Um, However, maybe that was also part of the beginning of the evolution of the game here in Australia that has taken generations of some new immigrants and some improved knowledge of the global capacity of the game for people to realise what a fabulous game football is.
And now, statistically, it is the highest participation sport of any sport in our state. So it's quite remarkable and so positive.
I agree.
We're going to get on to your journey in a moment, but you achieved a lot in football. But when you think about your younger self, were you dreaming of playing for Australia at that point in time, or were you just a kid who loved kicking a ball around?
As much as I did have multiple sporting interests and loved kicking the ball around, I was actually dreaming of playing in Europe. The awareness of the national team and the Socceroos at that point was relatively limited, I believe, certainly from my point of view. So I was dreaming of playing in Europe, and I guess as we talk through the journey, I probably got a reasonable part of the way there, but didn't quite get to that. However, representing your country, of course, is a magnificent achievement and something I'm very, very proud of.
I can't imagine along this journey of wanting to get to Europe, and we're going to get into that now, but I can't imagine what it would have been like leaving home at such a young age. I think you were around 15, were you, when you left home? But from an outsider's perspective, that's a fairly courageous move. How did you feel?
I felt really excited. I was in fact 16, but it was a great moment because from the age of 11, 12, I was hell-bent on achieving something in the game of football. And when I learnt that the Australian Institute of Sport had opened a football program, and I was going into a stage of my development where I could represent Tasmania and present myself at national championships, etc., I was hell-bent on getting a scholarship into the AIS, even at 11 or 12 years of age when it initially opened. And when I attended the National Youth Championships, which I believe were under 17s in 1984, Jim Shoulder and Ron Smith, the two AIS coaches, head coach and assistant coach, pulled me aside at the end of those championships and gave me a verbal invite into the AIS. So as I travelled back to Launceston, Tasmania, I had that verbal offer in my mind where I needed to share that with mum and dad, and that was followed up with the written letter of offer. And I was absolutely over the moon that I'd been given this opportunity to go into the national football program based at the AIS, a fully funded program.
So when you walked into the AIS for the first time, surrounded by the best young footballers in the country, familiar names to many who would be listening to this, such as former Socceroo star and in fact manager Frank Farina, of course, Paul Trimboli, a former Socceroo who I think played over 400 matches in the old NSL. What was your first impression? Did you have a sense of belonging very quickly?
Yes, I did have a sense of belonging. I was buoyed by the offer to go there, and I had a huge faith in the coaches, Jim and Ron, that they'd invested in me to come into the program. So that gave me, let's say, confidence and a level of support to come in with all of the other lads. I must say, hitting the training park and playing in the first few matches, you have to feel your way. You have to find your way around. And it was a tough, competitive environment. And everyone was playing for the positions and the number and the next game. So, but there was a level of support there, but there was also a strong level of competition in that AIS environment as well.
Oh, I could imagine.
Yeah.
So what were some of the highlights for you and the opportunities, I guess, that you got to experience being part of this elite AIS program and squad?
Well, the main highlight for me was that based on the principle of needing to train and play for approximately 10,000 hours over 10 years to have an opportunity to compete on the world stage, I needed to top up the volume of football and the quality of football environment that I was playing in. So the AIS gave me personally that opportunity in amongst some of the best young footballers in the country. And that meant we would train at least once, if not twice, 5 or 6 days a week. We would play at least twice, two matches a week. In terms of the opportunities in competition, we played in the National Youth League competition, which was an under-20 national competition that was for the NSL clubs. They could top up their squads with 3 senior players, which were always stacked, of course, against the AIS squad. So we, in terms of opportunities, we played in 2 seasons of the National Youth League competition, which we won the championship both of those years. And the other major opportunity that came along in 1985 was a tour of Western Germany and Holland, where we competed in a number of youth international competitions.
Not long after that, I mean, so much happened in those formative years from when you arrived at the AIS, but you received the greatest honour any young footballer can get, Kurt, and not only to be selected for the FIFA World Youth Championships, which were in 1987, but to captain your country. Talk us through that. How were you told that you would be captain?
It's a good question. I can't remember the actual specific moment where Les Scheinflug, who was coach at the time, advised me of that appointment. However, it was kind of an evolution in that I'd already captained the AIS squad in the last 18 months that I was in that program. In the World Cup qualifiers in New Zealand, I was captain of the squad. In the 2 or 3 tours that we did, including Thailand, New Zealand again, etc., I was captain of the squad. So as it came to the actual World Cup itself, it seemed relatively, I wasn't doing anything to lose the captaincy, so I retained the captaincy. It was very privileged, very proud to be able to captain our country onto that World Youth Cup stage in Chile in 1987.
So fair to assume you grew into that role, and you had the opportunity to grow into that role, but going to effectively a World Cup, that responsibility to lead your country, represent your country with the best young footballers in Australia. When you arrived over in Chile, how was it heading into, you toured Europe, but heading to South America where the sport is just a passion in every country? What was that experience like being part of a World Youth Championship?
It was an amazing experience. To the astute judgment of the coaching staff, they planned for us to do a 2-week stint in based in Buenos Aires in Argentina prior to the World Youth Cup in Santiago in Chile. Within that 2 weeks in Buenos Aires, we played 3 major friendly matches, which were obviously key preparation points for the World Youth Cup. One against Boca Juniors under-21 side at the Boca Junior Sports Club in Buenos Aires. One against Newell Old Boys, a fairly recognised second division club, their senior team, which was a tough match in Buenos Aires. And the third match was against a club called Vélez Sarsfield, who are a Division 1 team in Argentina, as a prelude to their Premier League match, actually. So they were moments of preparation, getting used to the South American style of football, which is quite a little bit different to how we're used to playing here. And also playing in front of crowds in different environments, crowds of 10, 15,000, etc., that we were going to experience in Santiago when we got there. So there was a good lead into the World Youth Cup. Football crazy nations that we're talking about. As we arrived in Santiago in Chile, there was quite an amazing situation that the Chilean team had actually had a fallout with the local media and had placed media bans on all of their training, no press conferences, no contact with the playing staff or coaches, which was highly offensive to the locals and the press, of course. So the first thing that Les Scheinflug did when we arrived is open up the offer of press, of open media, open training sessions, and we were caught in a frenzy of
Tremendous.
ambushed in a frenzy of activity as we arrived. So we actually became quite popular as a foreign country based in Santiago.
You ended up having, I think Chile were in your group, weren't they?
That's correct.
As well. So that's interesting. The media have put a ban. There was a ban put in place on the media by the home hosting nation. What was it like when you actually you were, as you mentioned, looked upon favourably? How was that when it actually came to game day when you faced them?
It was tense. It was tense. The game was our third game in the group, and that game depended upon which team would go through to the next round. Both Chile and ourselves had to win that match to go through to the next round. There were 78,000 people in the national stadium in Santiago, and I know, including my father, there are about 14 Australians with a inflatable boxing kangaroo. So it was quite hostile, that environment. Although in saying that, we were quite well received by the locals, and I think we're quite liked by the locals, apart from wanting to Chile to win the match, of course.
What an experience! And at that World Youth Championship, the side recorded 1 win, 2 losses. You scored the second goal in Australia's 2-0 victory over Togo in that group stage. What memories do you have of that moment?
Very, very special memories. I remember it was from if I recall correctly, it's from a free kick towards the corner flag. I'd positioned myself along with a couple of other players at the back end of the box towards the far post. And the ball was delivered beautifully by Anthony Grabac from the left-hand side of the park. A little bit floaty towards the back post, and I thought this is absolutely within my radar here. And I attacked the ball, a couple of challenges from the Togo players, but got a good leap at the ball and thought 101 of heading the ball towards goals, even as a centre half, is head the ball towards the goal line, make it hard for the keeper to get down to the ball. And I managed to head the ball on the goal line right inside the far post from about 10 feet outside of the far post. So it was a very special moment that I'll never forget.
And I know there was, with photos that are taken by media, there's some great shots that we've seen of that as well, and tremendous memory and memento for you as well. The captaining Australia pre that World Youth Championship, 1986. I want to go back to that because that must have been pretty special for you as well. You captained Australia at KG5 here in Hobart against Czechoslovakia, of course, now Czechia. That must have been one of those moments where everything sort of came full circle in a short space of time when you consider the amount of time that you'd actually been at the AIS. But to leave Trevelyan, to go to the AIS, and then not long after captain your country in your home state. That must have been an incredibly proud moment for you, but it must have been incredibly proud for your family and all those that would have been there.
Yes, yeah, very, very special moment. The chances of captaining in your first youth international, captaining your country in your home state, being Tasmania, of course, against a country like Czechoslovakia, are so minimal. It would be amazing. So, a great moment. Very proud of that 4-0 win against the Czechs. So, we're very happy with that at KGV, and very proud that my parents, along with certainly one pair of my grandparents, were able to attend that match in Hobart as well.
Mm. Um, while we're on the subject of big games in Tasmania, we don't see that anymore. We've obviously seen A-League matches here with Melbourne Victory having played games, Western United more recently. Do you have any thoughts as to why we are missing out? Do you think it's because of stadiums, or is it the sport itself has grown so much that it's the big cities on the mainland, your Melbourne, Sydney, Adelaide, Perth, Brisbane, that are getting these games? Because 4 decades later, we're not seeing international football here in our state, let alone not having an A-League team, which we now know Football Tasmania just most recently have advised that even though it was part of their strategic plan, it's no longer a priority at the moment. Do you have a view on why we're not seeing it and whether we should and how we could?
I think quite honestly that I think we need to see a greater effort from certainly the Football Federation Tasmania in regard to encouraging such matches in the state. They are the key body, the Football Federation of Tasmania, so they really need to be the key drivers in securing matches like that. I feel that there's certainly an appetite, but there also needs to be a realism as to the crowds that will be generated, the visitation to the state, etc., and therefore the available funds to support such events. Because in the short to mid-term, they're probably going to be one-off type events, but it certainly would encourage it. But I think we really need the federation to be the driving force behind organising such events going forward.
So we've seen international hockey played here in Tasmania. I can remember clearly having been there. We saw the Rugby Union World Cup. We hosted a match here in Launceston at now UTAS Stadium. It's a great shame when you consider the sport is the most highly played sport and participation rates in the state. But what was the support like back then? We're talking, youth team, but what was it like at KG5? Can you remember the experience of that night in terms of the atmosphere?
It was a fantastic atmosphere. KGV, as you're aware, does still to this day would only hold maybe 3,000 people at a push. But I think there was around 2,800, 3,000 people at that match in the middle of winter back in 1986. So has the level of interest increased? If the venue is more, maybe more appropriate, more supporter friendly, so to speak, then certainly I think they could achieve bigger crowds.
Kurt Reynolds, Australian youth captain at the World Youth Cup back in 1987, a boy from Trevally. He's our special guest. We're going to take a quick break and we're going to be back with more in just a moment.
Like Extra Time Tasmania, Lux Hair is local. This is our 18th year of serving the community. Located in East Launceston, Lux Hair offers a personalised service from Amanda and Ellen the moment you walk into their boutique salon. Support local and give the girls a call on 6331 4355 to receive the Lux experience.
Kurt Reynolds is our very special guest, our first guest on Extra Time Tasmania. Kurt, we move forward and we look at your professional career in senior football. Les Scheinflug, you've mentioned on a few occasions. Talk to us about his influence, because he's such a well-known identity who contributed so much to the game. But from first-hand experience, what was his impact like on your career?
Yes, Les had a significant impact on my football career. There was a period when I was looking to exit or come to the end of my term at the AIS that overlapped with the selection of the national youth team. That would have been around early 1986, maybe late 1985. And Les Scheinflug was the coach of the national youth team, where Jim Shoulder and Ron Smith were coaches at the AIS program. So I became involved with Les, who was a real disciplinarian and had a really strong hand with the youth group that he managed and coached on numerous occasions before that squad itself. And he ensured that there was good discipline and organisation within the squad, both off the park and on the park, to the extent where we were made or asked to call him boss. Anytime we needed to greet him, he was the boss, absolutely. So as it happened, so that crossover period from the AIS into the national youth team also coincided with me signing my first New South Wales State League contract with Blacktown City Football Club, which Les Scheinflug had signed up as coach for in 1986. So as I exited the AIS as a nomadic Tasmanian on the mainland and wondering where I was going to go from Canberra, it was almost a natural thing that Les had a discussion with me about joining him at Blacktown City in Sydney to commence my professional football career beyond my involvement at the AIS. So I became involved with Les at club level as well as national youth team level over a period of time. But a fantastic character, a colourful character, and certainly fond memories of working with Les.
And when you went into this level of football here in Australia, talk us through the experiences of being part of some great clubs in Australian football. And a lot of these clubs now with the A-League, the advent of the A-League over the last 20 odd years, there are a lot of different names in terms of the clubs. But talk us through what that was like at that level, because crowds were great, the facilities and the grounds, nothing like what we see today, but hard, tough, professional football. That experience, how did you find the segue, I guess, firstly, from going from youth to that level?
I think I sort of just explained part of how I transitioned from the AIS into the national youth team and then into Blacktown City at a New South Wales State League level, which was a tough league as well. Beyond that first year in State League and coming back from the World Youth Cup, Blacktown were promoted into the National League. So Blacktown were a very Australian-orientated club in a very western suburb Sydney area and struggled to get big crowds, but put a huge amount of effort and resource and money into building what has now become a very strong football base, Western Sydney, for as a producer of young footballers and professional footballers here in Australia, of course, over time. However, the experience at Blacktown City was great. Then moving on to Apia Leichhardt, that had a very Italian, inner western suburbs orientated feel to it, was a very different experience, a very passionate Italian experience. And then spending some time at West Adelaide Hellas, which were a Greek-orientated club based in Adelaide, was another experience as well. And I revelled and really enjoyed the engagement and involvement with the different ethnic groups. They were colourful, they were proud, there were flags, there were chants, there was food, there was beverages, there was passion about the game. It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. In terms of opponents over your career, was there one or maybe there might be two or three that made you think, gee, this is pretty special. I'm playing against, whether it's a direct opponent or just on the park, that thought, yeah, this person's at another level?
Yeah, there's been a few of those moments, but I could probably I'll narrow it down into two ways. One is here in Australia. I have very vivid memories, almost nightmare memories of three characters who were playing for Sydney Croatia at the time in the National League, being Manus Lamond of Papua New Guinean descent, but a very fast, quick wing-type player. Graham Arnold, whose reputation precedes us as a central number 9 type player for Sydney Croatia. And then on there, depending on how they rotated, Robbie Slater was the other striker playing for Sydney Croatia at that time. And I remember playing against those three up front, combined to some very, very good Yugoslavian, Croatian midfielders, etc. And they were a handful. Graham was hard. Robbie and Manus were buzzing around like flies around the park, and they were really hard to contain. From an international level, certainly the match against Yugoslavia at the World Youth Cup. Yugoslavia, with respect, went on to win the 1987 World Youth Cup, beating West Germany in the final on penalties after a 1-1 draw. But they had multiple players that went on to become the senior Yugoslavian team, or Croatian team in particular, after the revolution in the former Yugoslavia. Robert Prozanecki in midfield, David Suka as their number 9 striker, Vladimir Boban on one of the flanks were outstanding players. They beat us 4-0 on the day. It was rainy, it was muddy, it was a tough game, and we could not work them out. They were a different level, as you said. So they are the two situations that come to mind.
I'm going to, it's an incredible career, and again, thank you for being a guest on this program, because just looking across the table at you, I can still see the passion and what the memories and the spark in your eye from some of these, revisiting parts of your career from the very beginning. We're going to talk shortly about coming home, but what game stands out for you? Probably two questions. Firstly, what game stands out for you as a memory, whether it be club or representing your country? Is there a particular game that just brings back memories, whether they're good, whether they're bad?
The game that I think of more often than any other game is the game against Chile in Santiago, Chile, as our third group match that we had to win in the World Youth Cup that we played in. Stadium full of 78,000 Chileans. Couldn't hear a thing. You couldn't hear your teammates from a couple of meters away. It was that loud. It was a do or die match for us. I remember their first goal vividly. I remember George Colser, my twin centre half, being sent off for striking a player in the 27th minute that put us down to 10 men. I remember the feeling of that moment. I remember them scoring just after half-time as we regrouped with 10 players, reshuffled the decks as to how we were going to cope. We had a cracking first 20 minutes with half a dozen good chances to score in the game, but didn't put the ball in the net. And then they scored their second goal, as I said, early in the second half. And the feeling after, the deflated feeling after that match, it was a conclusion of a long journey. It was a conclusion of that event. It was an amazing experience, a massive disappointment, but there was also a very clear understanding of what it was and what it wasn't that I still reflect on.
And I guess in an environment where the home fans would have been in raptures at the end of that game as well, and having to, the feeling and the deflating feeling individually, but collectively as a team as well, knowing that the World Cup had come to an end, when you're in this sort of cauldron or Colosseum-like atmosphere, takes it to another level as well, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We didn't have long before we were taken to the airport after the match. I think it was maybe 36 hours. But as you're well aware, and the listeners are well aware, there's a lot of high-profile footballers in the Americas at the moment feeling some of those emotions.
My word, they are. I'm going to move on to coming back home to Tasmania, but you have spent a lot of time as well, professionally, career-wise, overseas. What did Kurt Reynolds get up to after professional football came to a conclusion?
During my early 20s, I was lucky enough to come across an opportunity to take on a sales representative job with Pepsi Cola Bottlers Australia in Sydney. And I really embraced the concept of, I started off on the road, crunching the concrete, calling on customers, talking to people, selling Pepsi Cola, in a tough market that was dominated by Coca-Cola, of course, back in the early to mid 80s. And I was lucky enough to be given or carved out a career over 5 or 6 years with Pepsi Cola. And early days, they put me on their international business management program that gave me opportunities to learn and progress and get to understand the 101 of sales and marketing. And I felt very privileged to have that opportunity and enjoyed that period of time with Pepsi Cola. And that allowed me to become, I guess, an item of interest in the FMCG industry in Sydney or New South Wales, at least 4 or 5 years after actually giving up playing football. It gave me an opportunity to join up with a major food importing business called Manassan Foods Australia, who had a very strong range of gourmet food products in roles such as account management for the likes of Woolworths, Coles, etc., and sales management. That also saw me given opportunities in South Australian market, also some time in Perth in WA as general manager for that business. And I took a little sabbatical, and a few months after a break, I joined a very large organisation called Dairy Farmers, based in Sydney, New South Wales, managing a very sizable business with 40-odd direct reports and a franchise network of about 1,700 franchised milk vendors around the state. So that was a massive learning curve in my early to mid-30s. And a couple of years into that role, I was approached by a Saudi dairy company because I then gained some hands-on experience in the dairy industry in a big market here in Australia, to come and run their sales and marketing part of the business based in Saudi, but also throughout the broader Middle East or neighbouring countries. So I was going through a marriage separation at the time and felt that I could take on that opportunity, and decided to take up the baton in Saudi Arabia and spent almost 10 years in the Middle East in and around the dairy and packaging industries. And a massive experience, both from a commercial experience, but also a personal progression and development opportunity, and the ability to travel and see some more of the world.
And now it's time for a message from another of our valued partners.
In the market for insurance, talk to the team at Network Insurance House in Launceston, Hobart and Smithton. With decades of experience, they help you protect what matters most at home and in business. Network Insurance House take the time to understand your needs, identify the appropriate cover and guide you through your options so you can choose with confidence. For all your insurance needs, give them a call on 6332 2500 or visit nih.com.au. Network Insurance House Tasmania Proprietary Limited is a corporate authorised representative of Network Insurance House Broking Proprietary Limited, AFSL 435538.
You've done it all, haven't you? And then the 360, you've come back here. During that period, Kurt, was continuing on in a football capacity post-playing career, was that something that you wanted to do, or did this career move into management and sales, did that just sort of happen naturally? Like that period of time, we know a lot of players, either they retire, they get out of the sport, or they move into a different career within football. That segue from finishing as a player, what was the mindset at that time? Did you want to continue in the sport if there was an opportunity? Because we know you did eventually when you came back here, but at that point of time when you finished your playing career, what was going through your mind?
I think it's different for every individual. As you go into something, you know what you're going to get, but we don't always think about what we're going to get when we come out of something. So it was a progression for me where I was getting a little bit tired of 4 seasons back to back, a young family travelling interstate, semi-professional footballer. Looks pretty sexy from the outside, but when you're living it and also needing to work full time to provide, etc., it's pretty hard going. So I'd done 4 or 5 seasons back to back because there was a change from winter NSL to summer NSL around that time, if you may recall, and I felt comfortable transitioning out away from football for a period of time and into the corporate environment, where my earning capacity had become greater with longer potential than it probably was at that point of time in football, because the opportunities for me to either come into the Socceroos squad were a little bit limited at that time, and my opportunities to go and fulfill my original dream of playing overseas were quite limited around that time because of, at the end of the day, the quality of player I was, but also visas and etc., residencies in foreign countries. So it felt quite natural for me to focus more of my energies on my corporate career in sales and marketing than I was going to in football around my mid-20s.
Yeah. A great insight, and thank you for sharing. So after spending a lot of time overseas, you eventually chose to come back to Tasmania. Was Tasmania always where you wanted to come back to?
It's always been home.
Yep.
And the beauty of my relationship with my family, and I really hope a lot of other people have it, is that they've always been welcoming for me to come home. And I always knew that I would come back to not only Tasmania, but Launceston specifically, because it is my home. And what I didn't understand is that the transition back to Australia and back home, particularly to Tasmania, were going to be as hard, if not harder, than some of the other transitions that I'd taken earlier in my life. And if I hadn't have had some of those learnings, I think it, may not have happened, or would have almost been impossible. But so I needed to reinvent myself a bit. And as I planned towards that and step back into Australia from the Middle Eastern world, I started to re-educate myself and reinvent myself back into football through coaching and learning, relearning the game and updating myself on the game to be able to come back and give back to the game also.
And give back, you certainly have. You touched on, obviously, with the coaching. You've coached back here in Tasmania, also been involved with Football Tasmania. Talk us through that period of your life, because we'll get on to obviously post that as well, and the joy you get from your children's involvement. But for you, Kurt, you're coming back into coaching and as a technical director, the roles that you had there, how fulfilling was that to go from playing to now, when you've come back to Australia, back to Tasmania, back home, to undertake those roles, as you said, giving back?
Yeah, it's been very, very fulfilling, and in some ways it's possibly difficult for some people to realise, because it's hard to see the whole picture of my journey. So I'm very grateful that I've been able to come back and do that kind of work and enjoy that kind of work. The resources at Football Federation Tasmania are a little bit limited and have been for some time, and possibly still are, relative to the participation in the game. And I really do hope that they improve and grow. But I felt personally, and in terms of the staff I work with at Football Federation Tasmania during that 3 or 4 year period, we really gave the game and junior and youth development and coach education a really good kick along in that period of time.
Is that where you think today Football Tasmania needs to invest in more time, and how do you sort of perceive their involvement in the community today? Because, as I said, the numbers are there, the clubs, the volunteers are doing an extraordinary job right around the state.
Absolutely.
Right around the state. From where you were and people you worked under, in terms of Football Tasmania now, for our sport to progress further and be seen, it's probably fair to say, with the World Cup obviously on at the moment, mainstream media are all over the sport, but they're only all over the sport. And I'll speak, from being an independent and working in media for myself, they're only interested in the sport for about a couple of weeks or as long as the Socceroos or Matilda's journey is in their respective World Cups.
Yeah.
Do you see it that way?
Unfortunately, yes, I do. And I think credit to yourself in what you're doing with the Extra Time podcast. That it just builds on the awareness and communication of the game. And obviously, there's other stakeholders in the game that need to be doing more of that also, including the federation, including the clubs. But it's great to see somebody like yourself getting more information about football out there, because you can never have an information overload. And the more we can educate people about the game, the more we can improve the quality of the experience in the game, certainly at junior and youth level, in order to retain some of the high level of participation that we have at those levels into senior and club levels, the better for all involved.
Your thoughts, and I think you're as well, you're really in a position where we would really value your opinion, but an A-League team. I mean, obviously you've been involved with the NSL, which is now obviously we've got the A-League. When you look at Tasmania, and we're about to have our own AFL and AFLW team. We're in the NBL. We're about to start our WNBL side later this year. Hockey, same. Should we have our own team in an A-League and W League side? Because I think the WSL here in Tasmania is growing all the time. We're seeing the new team, Launceston City, coming into the competition. Is our sport ready? Is the level ready in Tasmania for us to be in a national competition with football?
I might disappoint you on this and a few listeners on this front, but I don't believe that we're currently ready for that. And I can't see us being ready for that in the short to mid-term future. And there's a number of reasons around that. But I certainly could see potentially some hybrid type arrangement, maybe not dissimilar to the Hawthorn arrangement over the last couple of decades. It is now will cease, of course, but I really see it as a hard commercial story to run to have an A-League team here in Tasmania.
Why do you think that at the moment? I don't disagree with you, by the way. But why do you think that is? Is it the standard? Is it the level? Where is this coming from?
Yes, I believe it's the combination of a number of things. The standard of available and quality footballers in this state to form a team on the park. But I think more importantly, it's consideration to the status of the A-League itself at the moment, where there's still half of the clubs that are running at significant losses and or being funded in total by the Football Federation of Australia. That isn't widely spoken about, but some clubs are actually really struggling. And the old story in Tasmania that whenever you bring a statewide proposition into this particular small market, that you have the north-south divide. And the story about the stadium and the AFL rollout of the Tigers, etc., is a classic example of that playing out its role. And when you start to divide a population base and support base of just over 500,000 or 600,000 people in half, it gets very diluted and makes it very hard to float such a commercial proposition.
We talk about you spoke about the influence of and support from your parents and grandparents. You, Kurt Reynolds, as a father, 3 children who have all dabbled in the sport. You have Charlie, your son Charlie, playing for Launceston City in the NPL this season. What joy has that, and does that give you today to see that your children have all been involved in the beautiful game?
Yeah, that certainly, Rick, makes me very, very proud. None of them have been pushed. I've probably gone the other way and let them make their own decisions and run their own course, which I think is our duty as parents. But really proud of them. It's currently my daughter Candace. She played with a high school team in Sydney. She's made a return as a mother at the age of 35 with a church team on the central coast of New South Wales. She texted me last weekend saying, "Dad, we've lost 4-0, but I've made a couple of hard tackles on this guy that I was playing against," which I chuckled at. And so she's having fun in the game again. And my son made representative level in Sydney in his early teens and showed a lot of promise, but moved away from the game. And he now runs a successful business on the Gold Coast in Queensland. And young Charlie Young, just turned 18, is going really well, knocking a few goals and creating opportunities, assists as well. So, and it's nice for me personally and for Charlie to be involved back there at Launceston City FC. It's a good club, and that's where some of my journey started, and they should be proud of what they've done up there at Prospect.
I've noticed that. I've seen you there, obviously, on a couple of occasions, and you love to just. What I noticed is the proudness, but also you see these big huddles of people and the groups of supporters all together. But you like to really just be able to focus your attention on not only Charlie but the actual game. You still love the game deeply, don't you?
Yes, Rick, I do. And as much as I respect and appreciate that club environment and the little cop that exists up there at Prospect, I think that's great. And some people love that, and some people need it, and want the hamburger and the beer, and that's great. But I'm happy to be in the corner a little bit behind a tree, with the dog and the missus, and watching the game and taking it in a bit more, as you said. But I'm not against, obviously, chatting to people, anyone, or having a chat about the game. I think the more we talk about the game, the better.
Indeed. I just want to finish off with a couple of reflection questions, Kurt, because I think as we get older, we can think and reflect more on things. When you look back at where this all began, as we started from the outset of this chat at Trevelyan Primary School, is there anything you would have done differently if you had your time again?
If I had my time again, and it's beautiful in hindsight, but I would love to have invested more time and thought towards planning and what is at the other end of the journeys that you're entering into. As we've touched on and as we've talked about, I've had a number of chapters in my life and career and etc. But sometimes we don't. I'd like to improve the concept of when we start something, we have a clearer plan as to what it's going to look like when we evolve out of that situation. Sometimes we don't have the crystal ball that tells us that, and we don't have the maturity or knowledge to make that plan. But certainly when we talk about things like going into the AIS or coming into the national youth team squad or joining a new club, in hindsight, it would have been nice to say, well, what happens after that 2-year contract, or what happens at the end of that match against Chile? We didn't have it at the time.
You're living proof, Kurt Reynolds, that you can make it in Tasmania. If you could sit down with, as you were at the time, 16 years of age, living in Trevelyan, if you were sitting down with a 16-year-old child now who's showing talent, who really wants to play the sport, what advice would you give to them in terms of what they should do following their dream? Because I think particularly we're seeing more and more now in Tasmania. We're part of our country. We seem to be fitting in a lot more with our mainland. But what advice would you give to a young footballer that has a dream like you did?
A few things come to mind, Rick. I think, firstly, learn how to run, because it's going to help you in football. So learn how to run. Get yourself with the best possible coach that you can, whatever it takes. Get yourself with the best possible coach. Get yourself with the best possible club that you can. Listen to your parents and be good for your parents. And finally, work your ass off, because you're not going to succeed unless you do that.
Magnificent advice from, in my opinion, the best Tasmanian produced footballer that we've had, Kurt Reynolds. It's been wonderful to sit down with you. Thank you for being part of our first episode of Extra Time Tasmania. You have done yourself, your state, and your country proud in everything that you've achieved in football. You're giving back today. You're watching Charlie playing here in Tasmania. Not too much older than when you were first playing the game as well. It's done a full circle. So thank you. Congratulations. And it's been wonderful to have you here today, Kurt. Thank you.
You're welcome, Rick, and all the best with the new podcast. I wish you well.
That's Kurt Reynolds, our first guest on Extra Time Tasmania. A wonderful career. We're going to pop up the podcast very soon, and we hope you enjoy it. And we'll also have some information on football casuals fashion culture. If you don't know what that is, we're going to tell you about that as well. Thank you for listening.